How's it going, everybody? So today in this video I'm going to be discussing potassium and potassium deficiency. So potassium is an extremely important mineral. It is a mineral that a lot of people might actually be deficient in for two main reasons. The first reason is that most people don't consume enough potassium containing foods. Now, even if they do consume enough potassium from foods, a lot of people don't realize animal products are extremely high in potassium. Obviously, vegetables are extremely high in potassium. Everything from leafy greens to potatoes to a beefsteak are high in potassium. But what people don't realize is if you consume too much salt, sodium and potassium work in ratios and harmony with each other. More sodium, lower potassium. More potassium, less sodium. And so somebody who consumes too much potassium, primarily through supplementation, might get symptoms of an overdose, might get symptoms of a salt deficiency, in fact. But when you take salt during that time, those effects go away, interestingly enough. Now, your body tries its best to hold on to potassium, but many things can actually cause your body to let potassium go and excrete it. One of which would be, obviously, diuretics, mainly pharmaceutical-grade diuretics, and heavy sweating and exercise. So what are the symptoms of potassium deficiency? Well, potassium deficiency can cause all sorts of things. One of the main ones is heart palpitations. You might find that you're more anxious. You might find that you have a hard time calming down. Lethargy, depression, feeling tired and fatigued, feeling ran down, feeling burnt out, even insomnia. Okay, these are all signs of an electrolyte imbalance, and specifically potassium. Cramping can also happen, but it's more common in sodium deficiency. So, potassium is a very delicate mineral. All minerals are delicate, but potassium primarily is very delicate, and you have a very small room for air with potassium. This is my favorite potassium supplement. It's called New Salt. You can usually find it at most grocery stores in the salt section. It is just pure potassium chloride. 1/6 of a teaspoon gives you 530 milligrams, so 1/4 of a teaspoon gives you about 750 or so. In contrast, 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt gives you about 500 milligrams of sodium. So the thing is, if you take too much of this at once, especially without taking about equal amounts of sodium at the same time, it can cause symptoms of an overdose. So you want to be very careful with this. For me, I start off with about 1/8 of a teaspoon. And I just drink that down with some water, and typically I'll feel more relaxed almost immediately when I take it. Mind you, I am an athlete and I sweat heavily. Also, I've been doing a ketogenic diet for about 6 months now, and so I have more of a requirement for supplemental minerals in that regard. Sometimes, from what I've heard, sometimes people don't need to supplement potassium at all, or even worry about the potassium, as long as they don't consume exogenous salt. So supplemental salt, like salt shaker salt. So there's a lot of conflicting beliefs around salt balance, and too much salt is bad for you versus salt is just good for you, right? There's a book called The Salt Fix that talks about how salt's not bad for you. And from what I can see, foods naturally contain a healthy balance of minerals, of salt to potassium. There's really not that much salt in natural foods as it is. From what I've gathered, typically human beings actually used to get their salt intake from animal blood and from following other animals to rocks or salt licks, or from consuming bits of soil from the ground, but primarily from animal blood. A lot of people, it's controversial, but from what I know, that's where human beings originally got their salt intake, and probably most of their glucose as well, from the blood of animals, and from glycogen from muscle stores of the animal that they killed. But the reason why that's important is because we got to kind of think, like, how come our body doesn't just naturally regulate salt and potassium by itself? How come we don't just eat our natural diet and get salt and potassium in proper ratios? The answer is we probably would if we were actually eating our natural diet. And so that's a whole nother topic that most people would be turned off from if I got into in this video. But the point is, high blood pressure and heart palpitations, and even heart failure, and urinary problems as well, renal failure. All these things can happen from a electrolyte imbalance. And so I found taking a little bit, like a pinch or so of potassium salt throughout the day makes me feel normal, like makes me feel even quelled and healthy. Back when I used to eat carbohydrates, the need for potassium was even greater. It was actually very strange. Fluid balance is a very complicated thing with many different considerations to be taken into consideration. But essentially, try it, be very careful with it, especially if you have high blood pressure and you have heart issues, if you have anxiety. This is kind of taking care of a lot of the issues I've had. Magnesium is also important when we're talking about potassium balance. The reason is because magnesium actually helps regulate potassium balance and the retention of potassium. So if you just take potassium without magnesium, preferably at separate times, you take magnesium before bed and you take potassium a little pinch throughout the day. If you take potassium without magnesium, you might not notice any results. And magnesium also lowers high blood pressure. It relaxes arrhythmias and heart palpitations, and pretty much does all the same things that potassium is supposed to do. Now with magnesium, you're able to go a little bit. You can go a little bit. You don't really have to worry too much about the dose. The worst thing that can happen is you shit your pants. Basically, it can be a diuretic at higher dosages, but what I do is, as a general rule of thumb, 400 milligrams before bed. Helps you sleep, helps you relax, calms your muscles. And I'll just take maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon of potassium salt 3 times a day. Typically, I'll add maybe 1/16 of a teaspoon of salt along with the potassium, just to offset any possible side effects. And you got a pretty balanced electrolyte program right there. So, I mean, there's many other things that can be involved, calcium, vitamin D, but these are the most important things to start feeling better for most people. So, for anxiety, heart problems, for blood pressure, I think this is a pretty basic, fundamental place to start, okay? Once you've got your diet program on check, watch my videos on nutrition. Because you need very specific nutrition for these problems. Like if you're eating junk and then you just throw this supplement plan on top of it, probably not going to help you very much. But if you got your nutrition on check and you still feel like there's some issues, electrolyte imbalance can be a big thing. Another symptom is peeing excessively, and especially if you have dry mouth and unexplained thirst. For me, I thought I had diabetes. Doctors said I didn't. And what I found was potassium actually completely solved my over-pissing problem. Now, if I consume too much salt, I start pissing again. So, leave your questions down below. Let me know your experience with potassium and everything, and I'll talk to you on the next video.